room, it is their favorite. And Janet has made that clear to me all of her life, that that was her favorite. And that's the one she always wanted. And to me, it was nice, but for a guy who sang in the lower range, it was a difficult song. It wasn't always easy to sing O Holy Night and to do that. So this idea is, though, did you ever wonder, though, as we look at this series of carols, what was going on in the mind of the man or woman who was writing the song at the time? I mean, especially, that may be true of any of our favorite songs, whether they be popular songs or not. Did you ever wonder what the songwriter was thinking? Was it a true story? Was it something about their life? Or was it something about someone else's life? Or in this case, about Christmas? Was it just something about the season? Well, that's actually where we are and what we're going to do, and even go to the point, what was the writer thinking? What were they trying to convey? Maybe, what is the biblical theology? In fact, next Sunday in Away in a Manger, we're actually going to find that one of our favorite songs has some real questionable theology. Doesn't matter where you fall in the Christianity spectrum, whether you're Catholic to complete evangelical, there's some theology in Away in a Manger that's a little bit of a struggle. And some of you are going, well, I'm not coming to church because you're going to make fun of my favorite song. No, I'm not going to make fun of your favorite song, but we're going to challenge ourselves to see what is in it. And then finally, as I always say, if you walk out of here and there's not something about you in 2016 in the message, then you need to let me know. What do these carols mean today? As old as they are, so what do they mean? Well, Haley sang O Holy Night. The original writing is Cantique de Noël. So guess what? It isn't American originally. Sometimes in America we think everything's American. Even French fries, which actually, believe it or not, are American. They're just called French fries. Well, we have this idea that it's actually, and we don't understand it. So in this case, it was actually French. And this is actually the true story of O Holy Night. It was 1847. And a man named Placido Cappeau de Rocamure, and that's about as much of my French as I remember. He was known to be an avid poet, and Placido was approached by the priest in the local parish, and he asked him to compose a poem for the Christmas Eve service in Paris. Initially, said Cappeau was thinking, I may be a poet, but I can't write for the church. And the church in Paris was the parish outside of maybe Italy, outside of Rome itself. This was the place. And he was being asked to write a poem for that. So in order to figure out, he said, I need some sort of inspiration. So where did he go? What did he do? Did he just sit down? Did he go, to his quiet place? Did he go to the mountains? No, it says in his account of that was that he then sat down with the Gospel of Luke for his inspiration. So here's our first point in 2016. If you were challenged by the pastor to take on a task for Christmas Eve or any other time, and you weren't sure whether you could do it or not, where would you go for inspiration? Would you sit down with the gospel? Or would you try to figure it out yourself because you knew what's best? You had to sort this out. Would you go to your happy place? Would you put your headphones on and listen to your music? It's like I go to the gym and I watch people walking around and nobody knows anything that's going on because everybody's got their own music going in up here. So what is it? Would we actually go and would we challenge ourselves by reading the Bible? Do we do that when we're not sure how to raise our kids? Do we do that when we're not sure what's going on in our marriage? Do we do that with how often do we do it at all? But here's someone who's charged to write a poem for maybe the biggest church service of the year in one of the largest Catholic parishes in the world. And he goes to the Gospel of Luke for inspiration. I dare say that it would not be the Gospel of Luke that we would go to for ourselves. Maybe we'd go to our friends Maybe we go to our political party. We go to a lot of places. Maybe we go to the news on TV or the newspaper or wherever we get our news. But yet, the real important information is that big life decisions come from the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's one. So then he was set down, he envisioned what it might have been like to have been in Bethlehem. When you hear the Christmas story, do you put yourself in the Bible? That's one of the greatest ways to go read the Bible, is to put yourself in it. Take out the name there, put in Rick, put in your name, put in whatever it is, and think of that. Take out Bethlehem and put in Elkridge and Jessup and Columbia. So from there, he said, what was it like? And he penned the now famous words, the cantique, the Noel, or what we call O Holy Night. And we'll hear where the change came in just a little bit. So upon delivering the poem in Paris, he determined that this was a good poem, but it needed music. So he went to his favorite composer of the time, a local guy, and his name was Adolphe Charles Adams. Almost sounds American, but he's not. And it certainly doesn't sound French, and we're assuming by Adolf, he's probably German, and he was German. And in 1847, there were a lot of non-Christians in Germany. In fact, there were a lot of Jews in Germany. Adolphe Charles Adams was a practicing Jew. And at first, Adams was pretty reluctant to participate as a Jew. The celebration of the Savior of the world was not something that he was in a hurry to promote. And nor did he believe in it. But still, something about the words of the poem, as he read the poem, there's something about those words that kept him on board. And in just under 3 weeks, he composed that grand score that goes with these words. And it was immediately performed at the Christmas Eve Mass. Did you hear that? The poet went to a friend who wasn't a Christian. He was Jewish. And he didn't think he was going to offend him. Amazing in 2016. And the Jew admitted that he was reluctant and wasn't concerned about offending anyone. And yet, both of them somehow, must be coincidence, came together and created this piece of music. Just more evidence that God equips the called as opposed to calling the equipped. He used a Jew and he used a poet to bring about the message of the Savior of the world. Well, churches across France thought this was the greatest song in the world, and they just took it on. It became a staple for church choirs, and you can imagine having violins and orchestras and all playing that. It was an amazing sounding piece. But what's sad is Cappeau eventually left the Catholic Church. He fell away. And heaven forbid, as we in the church often do, those people fall away. Well, we don't want anything else to do with them. That has nothing to do with Catholic. That goes to Baptist, Presbyterian, goes down the line. That when you fall away, oh, we don't want you anymore because now God's mad at you and we're going to prove it because we can show that we're better than you. And so he fell away from the church, and that was one thing. And immediately the church began to say, well, I'm not so sure we should do this song anymore because we got to give him credit for it, and we don't want anyone to know that he's associated with us because he's one of them now. And then on top of this, oh, it's going to be really easy because look, the music's written by a Jew. And if people find out the music is written by a Jew and the words are written by a heathen, then obviously the message of the gospel of Christ cannot be heard. Really? God's that small, huh? Not so sure. So guess what the church did? The church said they stopped singing the song because it was too secular. Oh, come on. Look at the words. You heard the beautiful words as she sang them. Find a secular phrase in that song. It doesn't exist. It baffles the mind how the lyrics of that song could be considered to be secular. Once again, the church is concerned about its own rules, its own personalities, than it was the message of the gospel. Here's the church, unfortunately. And again, this is not the denominational church. This is the church. 2016, the church sometimes gets so wrapped up in its own ways that there are certain people, oh, nothing good could come out of those folks. I mean, come on, really? This guy Jesse? Well, who was Jesse? Oh, yeah, Jesse was David's father. Well, David became famous, but Jesse was sort of just a good guy. But out of the stump of Jesse, we heard read this morning, is where all of this would come. But David had, it was going back to a person that they didn't know. They knew that they knew David, and then we read about this weird dude in camel hair running around and eating locusts and honey and preaching the word. And wow, really? I mean, maybe they should have been ignored and discounted. I mean, they obviously didn't fit into the church. I mean, there's no way they came from the right temple. Or maybe they weren't associated with the right people. I mean, after all, in John 1, verse 46, wasn't it said, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Well, the good news is this didn't silence the song. It's obviously being sung now. The common folk continue to embrace it. Again, we have an uplifting of that time where the regular folks said, I don't care what the big folks say. This is what I'm going to do. And O Holy Night, it went from a mainstream hymn to what we call an underground hit. It was played in all the back rooms. And then in about 10 years, after the church had tried to bury it, an American writer called John Sullivan Dwight heard it. And Dwight heard the song, and he moved by the lyrics and all that, and he was really overcome by this one part of the verse. Truly he taught us to love one another. His law is love, and his gospel is peace. Chains shall he break, for the slave is our brother, and in his name all oppression shall cease. Dwight was a staunch abolitionist. He was looking at the fight in America over slavery. And he heard the gospel of Christ in the song, and in his hearing, what he heard was, God is really unhappy about slavery in America. And yet, the song was about slavery, period. The slavery to sin and death. Dwight translated the song, and he translated and published it in a magazine, and when American audiences in the North heard it, they fell in love. How many of us knew that O Holy Night was an abolitionist song in the American Civil War? We sing it as Jesus came to break the chains of slavery to sin and death, to depression, to anger, to addiction, to abuse, all the things that are wearing us down day in and day out. And at that time, the Civil War was wearing folks down, and an American writer heard the words of a French poet who was no longer in the church to music by a Jew who was never in the Christian church, and he said, this is what America needs to hear. There's a couple of unique situations that go with this. In 1871, during the Franco-Prussian War, it is said that on Christmas Eve, that in the middle of a firefight, that a French soldier jumped up out of his trench and began singing all three verses to O Holy Night. And upon completion, everything kind of stopped. It was crazy. It was a law, and he jumped up. He started singing. It was in a German soldier stood up on the other side, and he stood up, and in German he said, "From heaven above to earth I come to bring good news to everyone. Glad tidings of great joy I bring, which I must say and sing." And then in 1906, an inventor named Reginald Fessenden, you may know, took the teletype, took that, and we never had voices set over the air. And he believed that he could transmit voices. So he sat down and he read the Christmas story from Luke 2, having no idea that anyone could hear him, and they could. And he read that, and at the end of the story, again, not having any idea, he pulled his chair up to the transmitter, and he took his violin out. And guess what song was the first song ever heard on the airways? It was O Holy Night. And he played it. And people heard the gospel from a soldier in a trench, from two of them, to a man sitting and not even knowing that his words were going out. That Joy Allman says, from Billy Graham Evangelism Association, she says, "Oh, Holy Night is the perfect theological model. Our need for a Savior. Long lay the world in sin and error pining, till he appeared and the Spirit felt its worth." His relevance through humanity. In all our trials, be born to be our friend. He knows our need, our weakness is no stranger. And then she says, it sums it up on how we should live. Truly, he taught us to love one another. His law is love. His gospel is peace. Chains shall he break, for the slave is our brother, and in his name all oppression shall cease. Jesus told us in John 13 and verse 35, he says, "By this all men will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." Our love for one another is so important to Jesus that he made his second greatest commandment after the commandment to love God. Jesus didn't come into the world only to save us from eternity in hell. He came to change our life today, folks. He came to change our life today. Parts of that process are loving God, loving one another, and being holy, living a holy life. This season, when you sing this song with a new heart, allow it to call you out of the foxholes of life, to stand up and sing your message about a Savior that is born today. Be the John the Baptist. Be the unexpected deliverer of the good news. It's what we're called to be.